The rain had only just stopped when the boy's shoulders began to shake. Cars passed, people walked in and out of the restaurant behind him, neon lights flickered against the wet pavement, yet no one seemed to notice the small figure curled on the curb, trembling with silent sobs. He wasn't crying loudly. He couldn't. The world to him was a blur of muffled vibrations, distant shapes, and silent cruelty. But the one thing he did feel, more than the cold, more than the hunger, was humiliation. A group of teenagers stood a few feet away, holding up their phones, recording him as if his pain was entertainment. They laughed as the boy tried to hide his face, laughed harder when his hands shook too violently to form the signs he wanted. They had stolen his backpack, thrown his notebook into a puddle, and mocked the way he moved his lips when he tried to speak. But filming him cry, this was their final blow. In that moment, he felt smaller than ever, certain the world had no place for someone like him. And yet, just beyond the parking lot, the distant rumble of engines began to rise, quietly at first, then louder, as if the earth itself was waking up to defend him. But if you believe kindness still matters in this world, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bikers Kindness. Your support helps us spread stories that remind people what humanity truly looks like. Eli was 13, though he looked younger, thin, quiet, and always carrying a sketchbook tucked under his arm. Drawing was his way of speaking to a world that never seemed to hear him. Born deaf, he had spent most of his life on the sidelines of conversations he couldn't access, friendships he couldn't maintain, and classrooms he always struggled to keep up with. His mother worked double shifts at the textile warehouse, rarely home before midnight, so Eli often wandered around town after school, finding refuge in familiar places. The little restaurant with the blue and white awning was one of them. He couldn't hear the laughter from inside, but he could feel the warmth, the light, the sense of life that made him feel less alone. But today was different. Today, the cruelest boys from his school, Jason and his group, had followed him. They waited until he ordered food, then snatched the tray away before he could touch it. They mocked the way he moved his lips, mimicked his hand signs incorrectly, and shoved him outside where the rain soaked him within seconds. He didn't fight back. He never did. The boys weren't satisfied with the damage they caused. They needed an audience. Pulling out their phones, they egged each other on, capturing every moment of Eli shrinking into himself. One boy pushed him again, not hard, but enough to send him to the ground. Another pretended to cry dramatically, mocking his trembling shoulders. The leader laughed as he filmed, spinning some made-up story about how this weird deaf kid is freaking out because we said hi. Even though Eli couldn't understand their words, he understood their expressions. Their faces twisted with amusement at the sight of his pain. Their laughter, though silent to him, seemed to echo all around him. In his chest, the familiar tightness grew, something sharp and suffocating. He covered his face, trying to steady his breathing, but the panic only worsened. The world blurred. His hands shook uncontrollably. He felt like disappearing into the pavement. Inside the restaurant, however, someone was watching. The owner, a bearded man named Miguel, had seen the boys follow Eli in earlier. He had served Eli many times before, always moving slowly and pointing at the menu so the boy could read his lips. When he saw the group corner him outside, something uneasy stirred in him. Miguel had grown up rough, had spent years hanging around clubs with bikers before opening his restaurant. He recognized the signs of cruelty early, the way kids could be merciless when they sensed weakness. From behind the counter, he watched for a moment, hoping the boys would walk away. But then he saw one of them kick Eli's sketchbook into a puddle, and that was it. He stormed out, shouting at them to leave. The bullies scattered quickly, but not before flashing him smirks and flipping their phones his way. Still recording, still proud, Miguel didn't stop when they left. He kneeling next to Eli, gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Eli flinched at first, unsure, eyes still full of fear and humiliation. But when Miguel picked up the soaked sketchbook and gave it back, his expression softened. Still shaking, Eli tried to sign something, quick, frantic movements, but his hands were trembling too much to form clear shapes. Miguel didn't understand sign language, but he understood distress. He stood, pulled out his phone, and made a decision that would change everything. He had friends, brothers, really a biker group called the Iron Wind Guardians. He hadn't seen them much in the past year, life having pulled him into responsibilities, bills, and long work hours. But he knew one thing: they didn't tolerate cruelty. Especially toward kids, the message he typed was simple. He sent the video he had recorded of the bullies and wrote only 2 words, "I need you." 10 minutes later, the first engine roared into the parking lot. A black and chrome motorcycle pulled up, its headlight illuminating the curb where Eli sat. A tall woman in a leather vest stepped off the bike, her eyes hardening at the sight of the trembling boy. Another engine followed. Then another. One by one, the Iron Wind Guardians rode in, forming a tight circle around the restaurant. Within minutes, 40 bikers stood in silence, their presence overwhelming, powerful, and protective. The bullies, who had been lingering nearby, still laughing over the videos, froze when they saw the growing crowd. Their smirks vanished. Their phones dropped slightly. Their bravado dissolved instantly. The bikers didn't yell. They didn't chase. They didn't threaten. Instead, the leader, the woman from the first bike, walked toward Eli, kneeling to meet his gaze. She moved slowly, making sure he could see her lips. She asked if he was okay, speaking gently, her voice soft but steady. She pointed to his hands, encouraging him to sign. Eli hesitated, then slowly, cautiously formed signs with trembling fingers. He told her they had taken his bag, ruined his drawings, mocked him, followed him for months. He told her he felt worthless. He told her he didn't understand why people hated him for being different. As he signed, tears streamed down his face, not just from pain, but from the overwhelming sensation of finally being understood. The bikers listened intently. Some knelt beside him. Some placed warm hands on his shoulders. Some signed back, awkwardly but sincerely, trying to mimic his movements. A few actually knew some sign language already. One had a deaf nephew, another a sister. Slowly, Eli's breathing calmed. Slowly, the panic eased. Slowly, the shaking stopped. The bullies watched from a distance, their fear growing as more people from the restaurant came out with phones, recording not the humiliation of a deaf child, but the shame of the ones who hurt him. Then something remarkable happened. One of the bikers retrieved Eli's backpack from where the bullies had tossed it behind a dumpster. Another gathered his drawings, carefully drying them on the hood of a motorcycle with a cloth. Someone else bought him a hot meal from the restaurant and placed it gently into his hands. But it didn't end there. The video of the bikers standing with Eli spread quickly online. Within hours, the bullies who had filmed him were being confronted by parents, teachers, and furious community members. Their cruelty exposed, their mockery turned against them, their video no longer something they were proud of. They learned the hard way that humiliation cuts both ways, and the world was no longer laughing with them. Over the next few weeks, everything changed for Eli. The Iron Wind Guardians began picking him up from school, not to scare anyone, but to make sure he always felt safe. They taught him how to ride on the back of motorcycles, how to communicate better with people, how to stand taller. They didn't treat him like a fragile boy, they treated him like family. Miguel hired him to help after school, giving him a warm meal every evening and teaching him how to communicate with customers using notes and simple signs. The bikers helped raise money for hearing assistance tools, for art supplies, even for future college savings. Slowly, the cracks in Eli's confidence began to mend. The bullies, meanwhile, had mandatory counseling, community service, and apologies that weren't optional. Some had to face Eli directly, watching as he stood surrounded by the very people who refused to let him be alone anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was redemption, showing them what compassion looked like, what strength looked like, what humanity looked like. Months passed, and what began as one boy crying alone outside a restaurant became a movement in the town. Schools invited sign language teachers. Awareness campaigns started. People checked their own behavior, their own prejudices. Eli, once invisible, became a symbol of resilience, proof that one act of cruelty can be erased by many acts of kindness, and that family isn't always the one you are born into. Sometimes, it roars in on 2 wheels. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bikers Kindness. Your engagement helps us bring more life-changing stories to the world. Special request: before this video ends, comment "Kindness always wins" if you believe every child deserves protection, love, and a fair chance.